Hello. So I want to come back. I want to say with this one, I want to be sensitive and self-aware with the last video that I made, where I was a little bit referencing military conflicts, awful experiences, in awful episodes in the human experience, the war in Southeast Asia and the fighting in Southeast Asia, and the fighting in the Middle East, no less than Afghanistan. And I didn't mean to make light of those or reference those as though that I have a command or an appreciation or a background in those settings, in those experiences, to speak over that, because there's some things you cannot appreciate or understand some things without experiencing them. Most people would pay lip service to what I just said, but certain things you know what the experience of something is once you've done certain things, especially things that involve a high degree of risk and potential for great pain to oneself and maybe one's loved ones, would be something like conflict. But I just meant to point out the difference between the unfolding of an activity or of undertaking initiative as sophisticated, as much logistics, and as vital and consequential as an actual campaign of war, a war theater. But the difference between a preconceived outcome and acceptance of any outcome, come what may, and not an allegiance to structure for its own sake or to outcome for its own sake. You can see that between a conventional force and I don't like the word force because it's human beings that are doing effort and doing loss. But so the word force would be a euphemism for a lot of great unspeakable pain and suffering and loss. Loss being the more costly thing, but also the pain and suffering. But our society is also like that. Is that we have these different laws that are the laws are they're designed for a preconceived outcome, and so but they're not perfect, and they actually cannot mitigate and contend with the actual vicissitudes and eventualities. That's like the change in fortune, the sways and pendulum of outcome and circumstance, and also the different means of transcendence and capacity within those vicissitudes. The laws are adjusting for and accounting for and mitigating that to conserve the advantage along lines of nepotism, along the interest of those who would conceive what's called the system, no less than the technological apparatus and also the legal apparatus, which are now seamless, hand in glove, that is dovetail. So they are constantly changing laws, constantly fighting over laws, constantly changing laws, constantly fighting over laws, constantly changing laws to mitigate the actual failures in the law, but also the weakness in the law in capitalizing and amounting to and realizing what the law was set out to do, which was to preserve the values which are a sophisticated power structure of a bare word than power would just be a value structure. It was better than power. The value structure to preserve it along specific lines is what's very important. That's what's so distasteful about the concept of communism. You hear people that are willing to decapitate people, go off to war, do any manner of war crime in the name of fighting communism. What would be so bad about communism? I'm not saying communism is that good or bad, but I'm saying what would be significant about communism, socialism as a lesser degree, which you actually can't avoid socialism, because even as much as homage, as lip service as we pay to the fancy ourselves as having capitalism, we actually have a mixed experience right now, where you at least have a capitalistic socialism is like what we have. So you can't mitigate socialism, or even there's some profit that's also created by socialism, which may be why some of socialism is tolerated. Things like opportunity for public education and in different tiers of healthcare, and then also different civil services. A lot of that is very social. Yeah, that's like socialistic, but it also amounts to different. The social aspect is a pretext to garner the tax base, the tax revenue that would be entitled to different vouchers and entitlements of support and tax revenue in a capitalist system, such as rounding off and trucking off. The bus is actually a truck, so you're trucking off pre-K through 12 children to school daily, hella serious in a truck. a big old yellow truck with no seatbelts. That's also called a school bus. It looks, we're used to school buses, and it looks so friendly and like kid friendly to see a school bus, but it's actually a truck that's rounding off students and carting them off to indoctrination camps, and also deriving revenue for the actual apparatus of the school apparatus, but then also the society that their training will play into, enforcing children. That's what's so hellified and heinous about children, and they can feel it. Even some of the young students I've transported, I've referenced, they envy their pre-K children who have not made it into school. By the time they're only second and third grade, they're already regretting having to go to school. But who likes to get up and go to school? Who likes to get up and go to a job that is, if that's not child labor, if school is not a form of child labor. So you do have socialism and capitalism, capitalistic socialism, hellified, mean-spirited socialism is what we have, but not outright communism. Because what would be the difference between socialism and communism, to my layman appreciation, is that socialism would still have different degrees of entitlement and advantage that can more so be mitigated and controlled neatly past communism. Once you get into communism, you're having value for humans. So socialism is value for value's sake, within and beyond the sake of humanity. It's still value for value's sake. But once you get to communism, it's humanity for humanity's sake, going into, within, and beyond value had been the humanity first in communism, and that is distasteful and egregious to a structure that has the type of history that ours does, and also the continued interest and fervor, taste, delicacies, and appetites that we have. Something humanity for humanity's sake, leading into, within, and beyond value, is unstomachable to something such as what we have. And that might be such the fighting around things like communism. But because we have the socialism, which still preserves the value structure, you have to constantly change the laws, because human beings will adapt to anything, and human beings will find a way to exist within what you give them, even as tight down as you have a grip, like capitalism, or like the capitalistic socialism. You still have people that are surviving, so you still have a fight. So like, you're spending this much money on military and whatnot. What are you fighting? What is the military really fighting? They're fighting people finding a way to survive within whatever arbitrary structure you have overlaid upon the globe. That's what they're fighting. They're actually fighting to preserve advantage. Yes, you're fighting for patriotism, but it had not been a country, because it was acquired by breaching different treaties and also displacing human beings, which are part of the land and related to the land in deep forms of cause and effect. So you assault the land, and you victimize the land, and you shed blood on the land, and you claim a spiritual entitlement to the land. That spiritual entitlement is not congruent with the actual history of the land, and it plays out in all forms of injustice and disparity that is inevitable and imminent in a structure that has been based on that, because you actually can't get past the foundation of something. But people will find a way to survive, and that's what this amount of resource is fighting to overcome. But I just wanted to say that the laws are very arbitrary, but the actual method and mode of the law. What is the law? The law is the gun. So people can't stand a philosopher. Here go this philosopher with some green thing on his head, talking video on YouTube, as the laws essentially say I have the rights to do so. But a lot of people could not stomach someone talking like I am in terms of philosophy, but they would accept the law, even though the law has never been agreed upon. And we argue about cats and dogs, and yeah, them, this and that, but we're still about the law. And so, but that is law. That's what the law says. That is law. That is what the gun says. And nobody's arguing with a gun that's in your face, especially if it's multiple guns with multiple people. But what the method is, what the real gun had been is paternalism, because paternalism is the sensation that I know what's best for you and me and you, and it's likely therefore to work in my favor since it's my idea. That's what paternalism is, and that's actually what this society is predicated on. So you have I got one more video, but you got some people acting like dipshits, so I got to get to a different location. I'll try to complete this.